There is a former police chief who finds herself out of a job, and she doesn't understand the reasons why people distrust her and the entire Aurora Police Department, and so we're going to explain the reasons why, acabdevil style. So Skeleton Man, give me that funky beat. And since the former Aurora police chief, who is Vanessa Wilson, doesn't understand the reasons why she had to be fired, well, let me go back to a time before she was police chief. And what you're gonna see is a pattern where people just can't tolerate ineffective leadership from this police department given the history. Like, for example, back on March 2nd, 2015, an unarmed black man named Nikias Carter Vincent was fatally shot by a police officer, and that cost the city $2.5 million. And then in the same year, on June the 5th, 2015, another black man named Jeffrey Gale was hogtied and tasered repeatedly because he was suspected of being a pickpocket. And even after the police had subdued him, they continued to assault this man. Or you have the case of Dwight Cruz on November 14th, 2015. And so two police officers showed up to this man's house and then proceeded to violate this man's Fourth Amendment rights, which is why he won his lawsuit against these officers and also the department and the city. Or you have the case of Ozana Williams back on December 22nd, 2015. And the backstory there is that she was transporting her boyfriend to the hospital because her boyfriend had been shot. And for some reason, the person who had nothing to do with the shooting and was merely transporting her boyfriend, who she loved, to the hospital to get medical treatment, somehow ends up being assaulted by police officers. And then you have the case of Darson Kelly back on February 19th, 2016. And Darson Kelly had done nothing wrong, and he was just near a crime scene. And even though he had done nothing wrong, he found himself being assaulted by police officers who just assaulted him with tasers. And that was settled out of court for $110,000. And then you have the infamous case involving an innocent black man who was just trying to eat a muffin at a coffee shop, and that man's name is Omar Hassan. And this situation happened back on March 16th, 2016. And so you had Aurora police officers who just walked into a coffee shop and spotted the nearest black man that they saw, and then they pulled their firearms out and then pointed those firearms at Omar Hassan for no reason, who had done nothing wrong and was simply trying to eat a muffin. And those officers began shouting something at him. They said, quote, "Your kind of business is not welcome here," end quote. And so that case was settled out of court for $40,000. And then on June the 2nd, 2016, Aurora police officers just entered a home without a warrant, and then they just handcuffed two men for no reason, and that's why those two men got a settlement of $150,000. And then on June 18th, 2017, we find out that Aurora Police Lieutenant Charles DeShauser was caught on video referring to black people as some interesting things. And this man was originally fired for his comments, but he was later reinstated. And in March of 2019, you had the amazing case of Officer Nate Meyer. And Nate Meyer was the officer who was caught being drunk while in full uniform and while on duty, and the responding officers turned off their body cameras, and they also conveniently did not collect evidence that could have been used in a criminal prosecution. And you guessed it, Officer Nate Meyer still has a job to this very day. And then on August 4th of 2019, you had the case of Elijah McClain, who was an innocent black man who had the police called on him because it was somehow unusual for a black man to go to the store and purchase products. And Elijah McClain did not make it home because he encountered the Aurora Police Department. And then just 3 days later, on August 27th, 2019, Officer Levi Huffing left a black woman hog-tied in an inverted position for an extended period of time, and he ignored her cries for help. And so as a result of this, that officer was fired. And then on August the 10th, 2020, Officer Robert Rosen arrived to the King Soopers supermarket in order to assist another officer with the person who was allegedly trespassing. And as soon as Officer Rosen arrived to the supermarket, he began punching that man and then tasering him. And his justification was that the suspect was passively resisting because the person was laying on the floor and using their arms to cover themselves because this officer would not stop tasing them. And so as a result of this, that officer too was fired. And then in July of 2021, Officer John Hubert decided to assault a man, and that assault got so severe that he was charged with second-degree assault and numerous other offenses. And the other officer who was on the scene was also charged. Or how about the case where Aurora police officers detained a black family, including a mother and children, due to a case of mistaken identity because these police officers did not do their due diligence and they thought that the vehicle that the mother was driving was a stolen vehicle, and that was never true. And as you might imagine, Vanessa Wilson was quite embarrassed by this incident. We find out that the head of the local police union, whose name is Doug Wilkinson, said some pretty problematic things that caused a lot of outrage. And then we find out that even after Vanessa Wilson was fired, her partner decided to slander someone by accusing them of a very serious crime that they never committed. And I'm certain that Vanessa Wilson had nothing to do with that or had no knowledge of it. And that's sarcasm, by the way.
That's why I fired her.
Business as usual.
Arrivederci.